Let's talk more about how meaningful a deal or action items like these would be with our trade panel. Joining me now are Patrick Chovanec, who's managing director at Silvercrest Asset Management. Meredith Sumter is head of research, strategy, and operations at the Eurasia Group. And Riley Walters is policy analyst for Asia economy and technology at the Heritage Foundation. Welcome, everybody. Patrick, what do you think about calling these action items, and how well do you think these will all go over with the U.S. public, even if they are agreed to this afternoon?
So there's so much speculation going on about what might or might not be agreed to. I think we just have to wait and see what, number one, the announcement is, and then wait about 2 weeks to see whether that holds together or not, because we've had times in the past where it hasn't held together, and we've gone right back where we were with no agreement. For investors, I think there are two things to keep in mind. The first is that the Chinese economy is slowing, and it's slowing for reasons that predate the trade war. And will continue to slow with or without a trade deal. So that's an important thing. And the second is that the U.S. and China appear to be on a collision course on a host of other issues. So even if they solve even the kind of action items that you're talking about, I think there are still going to be events that rattle markets that have to do with continuing U.S. China trade tensions, not just related to trade, but security and other things.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And Meredith and Riley, you guys differ a bit on whether these tariffs are likely to go into effect next week. Meredith, you think they're probably likely to be postponed. And how long does it matter? And then what about the December 15th round that sounds like it would still be planned?
Yeah, really, the key here is that any truce that we're likely to see come out of this afternoon's talks, it's fragile. And it's not a breakthrough in substance at all. It's a sign that both sides are looking for a temporary truce. But the political incentives to make the harder concessions to get to a broader trade deal, we just don't see that coming anytime soon. So short-term gain, but over the long term, the relationship between the two largest economies will still remain rocky.
Meredith, which of the following action items is the biggest win for the U.S. if China agrees to it? If any of them you think are that significant, the Huawei waivers, the ag purchases, currency manipulation, Chinese market openings. I mean, which of these to you says, wow, look what we got accomplished here?
Not much actually says wow, because none of these action items are really structural in nature and getting to the 301 concerns that the Trump administration has raised with China. So look, we're likely to see a delay in the onward tariff negotiations. We might actually even see a slight rollback. I'm hearing from Chinese negotiators that they have dropped their asks for a full rollback of U.S. tariffs and would be happy to settle for just a slight rollback of tariffs. But fundamentally here, until those structural issues are addressed, most of those tariffs against Chinese products coming into the U.S. are likely to remain in place.
Okay, and Riley, you seem to think it's more likely than not that the tariffs will still go into effect, maybe even as soon as next week. Why is that?
I'm pretty pessimistic on these talks. Honestly, we've had 2 years of this now, and we have these occasional truces every now and then, but at the end of the day, I mean, we usually have tariffs coming back on eventually anyways, which is a problem in itself. We could have a truce. I'm not saying that it's not impossible. I'm just a little bit more pessimistic around either a truce or a small deal. So next week, I think we do see the tariffs coming about. It is pretty marginal compared to the tariffs we saw in September or the tariffs that we will see in December. But we also have some other interesting things, too, is, next week, China's going to release their new GDP numbers, and this could actually be another thing we're talking about in a week, another factor that contributes to whether they decide to continue the trade war or not.
Right, and we're always trying to figure out what the GDP really is and what it's reported as and so forth. Yeah. Patrick, Steve Bannon was on this morning, and when asked, look, what has the White House really won here, his take on it was the following. Take a quick listen.
China is hurting so much by these tariffs, and what they're trying to do is anything possible to get President Trump, I think, to delay or either nullify the October tariffs.
In other words, he says the tariffs, Patrick, got China to the negotiating table, and that itself is a win. Do you agree on that? I mean, what would happen if we didn't have them here to make a deal, so to speak?
I think that there would be a lot of other paths that the United States could have taken to get to a substantive conversation with China. I don't think this is the only one. I know that, they want to claim that because they want to show that this is putting a lot of pressure on China. The U.S. economy is also feeling some pressure here. What I heard from your other guests is that regardless of what happens today, there's going to be continuing uncertainty about tariffs, and a lot of tariffs are going to remain in place. And if you look at the surveys of businesses in both manufacturing and non-manufacturing, but particularly manufacturing, which is now in contraction in the United States,
right,
it's one of the things that has really weighed on businesses. Not so much consumer sentiment yet.
Mm-hmm.
That's been strong. But on business sentiment, and they're concerned not just about the impact of tariffs that are already in place, but the possibility of others.
Yeah, and so what I take from this whole discussion is that you guys are at best short-term optimistic, but everybody long-term seems to be quite downbeat on what's really been accomplished here, and maybe the fact that the U.S. China relationship looks like it just could continue to get worse. With all that said, we'll see what comes about in an hour and a half or so. For now, thank you very much. Appreciate it, everybody. Patrick Jovanik, Meredith Sumter, and Riley Walters.